Sir, please fasten your seatbelt. Ethan froze as the flight attendant looked up, and it was her. Lily, his contract wife. The woman he once called temporary. The plane hummed at 30,000 feet, but his chest felt heavier than gravity itself. Flash, her signing the contract, slipping on a ring, whispering this isn't real. Flash, his voice, cold, cutting, you were just part of the deal. Now she stood inches away, calm, distant, like he was just another passenger. A sudden panic broke out across the aisle, an elderly man gasping for air. Lily dropped everything, kneeling beside him, her voice soft, steady, her hands gentle, saving a life like it was instinct. Ethan watched, shattered. This was the woman he pushed away, the woman who was real. As the plane leveled, she returned, placing something in his palm without a word. The ring. You can keep it, she said quietly. It was never real, right? Sometimes, the person you promised not to love becomes the only one you can't forget. The cabin lights dim to a soft amber glow as the plane cruises steadily at 30,000 feet above the clouds. A quiet hum filling the air, but inside Ethan Cole, nothing feels steady, nothing feels quiet, because the moment she steps into the aisle, time fractures, his breath catching in his chest, as if the oxygen has thinned. And there she is, Lily Carter, standing just a few feet away in a crisp navy uniform. Her hair neatly tied back, her expression calm, professional, untouched by the past that is crashing violently through his mind. And for a second, he thinks he's mistaken, that his memory is playing tricks on him, because this woman looks stronger, sharper, untouchable, nothing like the girl who once sat across from him at a polished glass table, nervously twisting her fingers as she signed a contract that would change both of their lives. But then her eyes meet his, just for a fraction of a second, and something flickers, something familiar, something real, before it disappears behind the practiced mask of a flight attendant doing her job, and she speaks in that same steady tone. Sir, can I offer you something to drink? As if he's just another passenger, as if he's not the man who once placed a ring on her finger and told her it meant nothing, as if he didn't walk away and leave her with words that cut deeper than he ever intended. And Ethan swallows hard, his fingers tightening around the armrest, because suddenly every memory is rushing back, uninvited and relentless. The day he first saw her, standing in a small, crowded office with worn floors and flickering lights, clutching a folder like it was her last chance, her voice soft but determined when she said she needed the money, not for herself, but for someone else. And he had studied her then, calculating, detached, convincing himself that this was just business, just another arrangement to protect his company, to secure his position, to maintain control. And when he slid the contract across the table, he made it clear, no emotions, no expectations, no future beyond the expiration date printed in black ink. And she had hesitated, just for a moment, her fingers hovering over the pen, before she nodded and signed anyway, sealing a deal that was never supposed to mean anything, but somewhere between the quiet dinners and the forced smiles at public events, something shifted, something neither of them acknowledged, not out loud, not ever, until the night everything broke, until the moment he looked at her with cold certainty and said, you were just part of the deal. And even now, sitting here miles above the ground, he can still see the way her expression changed, not dramatic, not loud, just a small, quiet fracture, like something inside her finally gave up. And now she stands in front of him again, composed, distant, untouchable. And for the first time since he built his empire, Ethan Cole realizes he might have lost the only thing that was ever real. The seatbelt sign flickers on with a soft chime, but Ethan does not move, his gaze fixed on the narrow aisle where Lily disappears behind the curtain, his pulse still uneven, his mind refusing to stay in the present as fragments of the past begin stitching themselves together whether he wants them to or not. Because there was a time when everything between them felt controlled, predictable, safe inside the boundaries of a contract that defined every interaction, every smile, every shared moment. And yet it was never the grand events or the flashing cameras that stayed with him. It was the quiet details he never meant to notice, like the way she would hesitate before stepping into a room full of executives, her fingers brushing lightly against the fabric of her dress as if grounding herself, or how she always thanked the staff by name, even when no one else bothered to remember, and he had told himself it was irrelevant. That kindness did not belong in his world of numbers and negotiations, that emotions were distractions he could not afford. But then there were nights when the city lights stretched endlessly beyond the windows of his penthouse, and she would stand there, silent, looking out as if she was searching for something she had lost long before she met him. And without thinking he would ask, "What are you looking at?" And she would smile, soft and distant, and say, "A life that feels real." And he never knew how to answer that. So he did what he always did. He retreated into control, into logic, into the comfort of rules that kept everything from becoming complicated. Until the moment those rules started to feel like walls instead of protection. Until the distance between them no longer felt intentional but inevitable. And he began to notice the absence of her voice in rooms that once felt too quiet, the absence of her presence in spaces that suddenly felt too large. And still he said nothing. Still he convinced himself it was temporary, that everything had an end date, and this was no different, until the night it all unraveled. The night a single accusation shifted everything, because in his world trust was fragile and easily broken, and when doubt crept in, it spread fast, poisoning everything it touched. And when he looked at her that night, standing in front of him with confusion in her eyes, asking him what he meant, he chose to believe the worst. He chose certainty over understanding, and the words came out colder than he expected, sharper than he intended, and once they were spoken there was no taking them back, no rewriting the moment, only the silence that followed, heavy and final. And now as the plane hums steadily through the dark sky, Ethan leans back slowly, closing his eyes for just a second, but it does not help, because the memory of her expression that night refuses to fade, and somewhere behind the thin curtain, just a few steps away, is the woman who lived through that moment with him, the woman who walked away without looking back. And for the first time since he boarded this flight, Ethan realizes that seeing her again is not a coincidence. It is a confrontation with everything he chose not to feel, everything he chose to ignore, and the question he cannot escape is no longer why she left, but whether he was ever worth staying for in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, we may experience slight turbulence. Please remain seated. The captain's voice cuts softly through the cabin, but Ethan barely registers it, because something far more unsettling is already happening inside him, something he cannot fasten down or stabilize. And as the plane shifts gently in the night sky, his eyes move instinctively toward the aisle again, searching without admitting it, waiting without understanding why, until the curtain parts and Lily steps out once more, her posture straight, her movements precise, every gesture controlled, as if she has mastered the art of distance. And she walks past him without hesitation, stopping a few rows ahead to assist a passenger, her voice calm, steady, reassuring. And Ethan watches the way she leans slightly to listen, the way she softens her tone just enough to comfort without overstepping, and it hits him with a quiet force that this is who she has always been, not the version shaped by his world, not the woman standing beside him at charity galas or business dinners, but this, someone who shows up, who cares, who gives without expecting anything in return. And for a moment he wonders if he ever truly saw her at all, or if he only saw what fit inside his carefully structured life, because back then everything had a purpose, a function, a reason that could be explained and justified, and Lily did not fit into any of those categories, not really. Not once she stopped acting like part of the agreement and started being something real, something unpredictable, something that made him pause in ways he did not understand, like the morning she showed up late to an event because she had stayed behind to help a stranger on the street, or the way she once refused to leave a conversation with a staff member who was clearly struggling, even when it meant arriving late to a meeting that mattered to him. And he had been irritated then, frustrated, by what he saw as unnecessary distractions, telling her quietly but firmly that there were priorities she needed to respect. And she had looked at him, not angry, not defensive, just disappointed in a way that lingered longer than any argument could have. And now sitting here, watching her move through the narrow aisle with effortless grace, he realizes that what he once dismissed as distractions were the very things that made her who she is, the very things he is now unable to look away from. And as she makes her way back toward him, stopping briefly to check on a passenger across the aisle, their eyes meet again, and this time there is no flicker, No hesitation, just a calm acknowledgement, like she has already accepted everything he is still trying to understand, and she speaks again, her tone polite, distant. Sir, would you like anything else? And for a second Ethan forgets how to respond, because the question feels heavier than it should, like it carries something unspoken. Beneath it, something he cannot quite reach, and all he can manage is a quiet, no, thank you, as she nods and moves on, leaving behind a silence that feels louder than anything she could have said. And as the cabin settles back into its steady rhythm, Ethan leans forward slightly, his hands clasped together, his mind no longer focused on the past alone, but on the realization slowly taking shape in the present, that the distance between them is no longer defined by a contract or a misunderstanding, but by something far more difficult to bridge, something that cannot be rewritten or renegotiated. Because the version of Lily standing just a few feet away is not waiting for explanations, not waiting for apologies, and perhaps not waiting for him at all. The cabin dims further as most passengers settle into a quiet, drifting stillness, but Ethan cannot rest, his mind restless, his chest tight, with something unfamiliar, something he has spent years avoiding. And as the plane continues its steady path across the dark sky, he notices movement again, a subtle shift in energy a few rows ahead, where a middle-aged man begins to fidget in his seat, his breathing uneven, his hands gripping the armrests as if searching for control, and before anyone else fully reacts, Lily is already there, kneeling slightly beside him, her voice low and steady, guiding him through each breath as if she has done this 100 times before. You are okay, just focus on me, slow breaths, in and out. And the man follows her voice, gradually calming, his tension easing under her presence, and Ethan watches every detail, the way she does not rush, the way she does not look around for recognition, the way she stays until she is certain the man is stable again, offering him water, adjusting his seat, and only then stepping back with a small, reassuring smile. And something inside Ethan shifts again, deeper this time, because there is no audience here, no expectation, no contract, no reason for her to perform kindness except that it is simply who she is, and he realizes with a sharp clarity that he never understood the value of that, not when it was right in front of him, not when it mattered most. And as she turns to leave, the man gently reaches for her hand and thanks her, his voice sincere, his relief visible, and she responds with the same quiet grace. You are very welcome. Just press the call button if you need anything. Before standing and continuing down the aisle, her expression returning to that calm, composed professionalism. But Ethan sees it differently now. He sees the layers beneath it, the strength it takes to be this consistent, this steady, this real, and he feels something tighten in his chest again, not pain, not regret exactly, but something closer to understanding, something that arrives too late to change what has already happened. And when she finally reaches his row again, she pauses just briefly, not long enough to draw attention, just enough for him to feel it. And she places a small glass of water on his tray table without a word, a simple gesture, almost automatic, but it carries a weight he cannot ignore, because it reminds him of nights when she would do the same without being asked, leaving a glass beside him while he worked late, never interrupting, never demanding, just quietly present in a way he never acknowledged. And now as he looks up at her, searching for something, anything that might still connect them, she meets his gaze with the same calm distance, and for a moment he almost speaks, almost says her name, almost breaks the silence that has grown between them. But the words do not come, because what could he possibly say that would undo everything? What explanation could reach someone who has already moved on from needing one? And before he can find the courage or the clarity, she gives a small, polite nod and steps away again, leaving him with nothing but the faint echo of what used to be, and the realization that the space between them is no longer empty. It is filled with everything he failed to see until now. The glass of water sits untouched on Ethan's tray table, catching the soft cabin light, but his attention is no longer on the present moment. It is slipping backward again, pulled into a memory he once dismissed as insignificant, yet now refuses to let go, because there was a night, late, quiet, when the city outside his penthouse was wrapped in a soft rain, the kind that blurred the skyline into something almost gentle. And Lily had been standing near the window, barefoot, holding her shoes in one hand as if she had forgotten to put them back on, her reflection faint against the glass. And he had just finished a call, another deal closed, another victory secured, and when he turned, he found her watching the rain instead of him, and something about that had unsettled him in a way he could not explain. So he asked, half distracted, half curious, "Why do you always stand there?" And she did not answer right away. She just traced a small line through the fog on the window with her finger, as if writing something invisible, before saying softly, "Because it feels like the only place where things slow down." And he had frowned slightly, not understanding, because in his world slowing down meant losing control, losing momentum, losing everything he had built. And he had responded the only way he knew how, with logic, with certainty, telling her that time was not something to waste, that everything had a purpose, a direction, a result. And she had turned then, looking at him, with a quiet expression that was not quite sadness, not quite disappointment, but something deeper, something that made him uncomfortable enough to look away first. And now, sitting here thousands of miles above the ground, Ethan exhales slowly, realizing that he never asked her what she needed, never asked what made her stay, because he assumed the contract was enough, the money was enough, the arrangement was clear, and yet she had given more than what was written, more than what was required, showing up in ways he never recognized until they were gone. And as that thought settles, he hears her voice again, closer this time, but different, not directed at him, not softened by familiarity, just professional, composed. "We will be preparing for landing shortly. Please ensure your seatbacks are upright." And the words pull him back into the present with a quiet finality, because this flight is not endless. This moment is not something he can hold on to forever. And he watches as she moves down the aisle once more, checking rows, adjusting details, her focus steady, her distance unbroken, and something inside him tightens again, not from confusion this time, but from clarity, because he understands now that she is not avoiding him, she is simply no longer affected by him, and that realization carries a weight heavier than anything he has felt before, because it means the power he once had in this connection no longer exists. It means the version of her that waited, that hoped, that tried, is no longer here. And as the plane begins its gradual descent, the lights shifting slightly, the engine hum deepening, Ethan leans forward just enough to see her one more time, memorizing the way she moves, the way she belongs to a world that no longer includes him. And for the first time since he boarded this flight, he feels something he cannot negotiate, cannot control, cannot rewrite. The undeniable truth that losing her was not a moment, it was a consequence. And now, as the ground slowly rises to meet them, he is left with only one question he does not know how to answer, not how he lost her, but whether he will ever be able to face her again once this flight ends. The wheels touch the runway with a firm, steady thud, the slight jolt traveling through the cabin as the plane begins to slow. But inside Ethan, everything feels like it is accelerating. His thoughts racing ahead of the moment he cannot avoid any longer. Because once the seatbelt sign turns off, once the passengers stand and the overhead bins open, once the controlled environment of this flight dissolves into the chaos of arrival, Lily will walk away again. And this time there will be no seat assignment, no narrow aisle, no reason for her to come back. And the finality of that realization presses against him harder than anything before, as the engines reverse and the plane gradually rolls toward the gate. The soft glow of the airport lights stretching across the windows like a quiet reminder that this journey is ending whether he is ready or not. And when the announcement finally comes, calm and routine, "Welcome to New York. Local time is 9:42 p.m. It feels almost surreal how ordinary it sounds compared to the weight building inside him. Because for everyone else this is just another landing, just another destination reached. But for him it feels like a closing door, and as the plane comes to a complete stop, there is that familiar pause, the collective breath before movement begins. And then the seatbelt sign clicks off, a simple sound that suddenly carries more meaning than it ever has before, and passengers begin to stand, reaching for bags, exchanging quiet words, returning to their own lives. While Ethan remains seated for a moment longer, his hands resting on his knees, his gaze fixed ahead, as if staying still might somehow hold time in place. But it does not. Nothing does, and when he finally stands, the motion feels heavier than it should, like stepping into something irreversible. And he moves slowly with the line, the narrow aisle guiding him forward, each step, bringing him closer to the front of the plane, closer to where she is. And when he finally sees her again, standing near the exit with the same composed posture, thanking passengers as they leave, it feels almost unreal how normal she appears, how untouched by everything he is still carrying. And one by one people pass her, offering brief smiles, quiet thanks, and she responds with the same gentle professionalism, the same calm presence, until it is his turn, and for a second everything seems to slow, the sounds around him fading into the background, the movement of the line disappearing, leaving only the space between them, and he stops just in front of her, close enough to see the small details he used to overlook, the subtle shift in her expression, the steady way she holds herself, and for a moment neither of them speaks, the silence stretching just enough to feel intentional. And then she looks at him, not surprised, not unsettled, just aware, and says softly, "Have a good evening." The same words she has said to every passenger before him. But this time they land differently, heavier, final in a way he cannot ignore, and something inside him pushes forward, something he has held back since the moment he saw her. And he opens his mouth, finally ready to speak her name, to say something that might reach her, might matter, might change anything at all. But before the words can form, she steps slightly aside, creating space for him to pass, her gaze already shifting beyond him to the next person in line. And in that small, quiet movement, Ethan understands more than any explanation could ever give him, because it is not rejection, not anger, not even distance. It is something far more complete. She has already moved on, and as he steps past her, into the open doorway, into the bright lights of the terminal, he realizes that this time, she did not walk away from him. He is the one being left behind. The terminal is bright, loud, alive with movement, but Ethan hears none of it, because the moment he steps past the aircraft door, something inside him refuses to follow, as if a part of him is still standing in that narrow aisle, still waiting for a second that has already passed, and he slows instinctively, the crowd moving around him in a steady current while he stands just off to the side, his hand tightening slightly around the handle of his carry-on, his mind replaying that final moment. Again and again, the way she looked at him without hesitation, without softness, without anything that belonged to what they once were. And for a man who built his entire life on control, on timing, on knowing exactly when to act, and when to wait, he suddenly realizes he has never felt this uncertain, this late, and he exhales slowly, glancing back over his shoulder toward the jet bridge, knowing he should keep moving, knowing there is nothing waiting for him behind that door, but something keeps him rooted in place, something unfinished, something he cannot walk away from as easily as he once did. And the memory returns again, sharper now, clearer. The night everything ended, not in a dramatic explosion, not in raised voices or broken promises, but in something quieter, something far more final, because after he said those words, after he made it clear that she was nothing more than an arrangement, Lily did not argue. She did not try to explain or defend herself. She simply stood there for a moment, absorbing the impact in silence. And then she nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible motion, as if she had just accepted something she had been preparing for all along. And she took off the ring slowly, carefully, placing it on the table between them, not as an act of anger, not as a gesture meant to hurt him, but as a quiet return of something that was never truly hers. And when she finally spoke, her voice was steady, calm in a way that unsettled him more than any confrontation could have. "Then this should be easy for you." And he remembers the way those words lingered, the way they did not sound like defeat, but like closure, something he did not recognize at the time, something he dismissed as expected, because in his mind everything had gone according to plan, the contract had ended, the agreement had been fulfilled, there was nothing left to consider, nothing left to feel. And yet now, standing in the middle of a crowded terminal with people rushing past him and announcements echoing overhead, he realizes how wrong he was. Because what ended that night was not just an arrangement, it was something he never allowed himself to define, something that grew quietly in the spaces he ignored, in the moments he dismissed, and now the absence of it feels louder than anything he has ever achieved, and he shifts slightly, his eyes moving back toward the gate again, his steps finally turning in that direction without fully deciding to, because for the first time in a long time, he is not thinking about consequences or outcomes. He is not calculating risks or weighing options. He is simply following. Something instinctive, something uncertain, and as he walks against the flow of passengers, moving closer to the place he just left, the only thought that stays with him is not whether she will listen, not whether she will forgive him, but whether he has already waited too long to even try. The closer Ethan gets to the gate, the quieter everything feels, as if the noise of the terminal fades just enough to make room for the sound of his own hesitation, and he slows his pace without realizing it. His steps no longer driven by urgency, but by something heavier, something that feels dangerously close to doubt, because for the first time since he turned back, he is not thinking about reaching her. He is thinking about what happens if he does. What happens if she looks at him the same way she did on that plane, calm, distant, unaffected, and offers him nothing more than the same polite closure she has already given, and the thought settles into him with a weight he cannot ignore, because it forces him to confront something he has avoided his entire life, the possibility that not everything can be fixed, not everything can be negotiated back into place. And as he approaches the gate, he sees the final passengers exiting, the crew beginning their routine reset, movements efficient and detached, and for a moment he stops just short of the entrance, his gaze fixed on the open doorway where she should be, where she was just minutes ago, but the space is already shifting, already changing, as if the moment he is chasing is slipping further away with every second he hesitates, and he exhales slowly, stepping forward anyway, crossing the invisible line that separates what is done from what might still be possible. And inside the jet bridge the air feels different, quieter, more contained, and he walks with purpose now, no longer questioning why he is here, only knowing that leaving without trying would be something he could not ignore, not this time. And as he reaches the aircraft door, he slows again, his eyes scanning the narrow space, the familiar layout now empty of passengers, and then he sees her, a few steps inside, speaking quietly with another crew member. Her posture relaxed in a way he did not see before, her expression softer when she is not performing for strangers, and for a moment he simply stands there, watching, realizing how rare it is to see her like this, how much he missed by only knowing the version of her that fit within his world. And when she finishes the conversation and turns slightly, her gaze lands on him again. And this time there is a pause, a brief but undeniable shift, not surprise exactly, but awareness that he chose to come back, that he chose not to walk away, and the silence between them feels different now, less final, but not yet open, not yet forgiving, and Ethan takes a step forward, the distance closing slowly, his voice quieter than it has ever been, stripped of certainty, stripped of control. Lily, and the sound of her name in his voice carries something unfamiliar, something honest, and she holds his gaze for a moment before responding, her tone calm, but no longer distant, just measured. You should be on your way. And there is no edge to her words, no rejection, just a simple truth, a boundary drawn without force. And Ethan nods slightly, acknowledging it, but he does not step back, not this time, because something inside him refuses to retreat again. And he meets her eyes with a steadiness that does not come from confidence, but from clarity, from finally understanding. What is at stake? And he says quietly, I know. And for a second the space between them holds, balanced on the edge of something unspoken, something that has not yet decided what it will become, and in that moment, neither of them moves, as if both are waiting to see whether this is the end of something, or the beginning of something neither of them planned. For a moment, neither of them moves, the quiet hum of the aircraft now the only sound filling the space between them, and Ethan feels it clearly. This is the moment everything will either end completely or finally begin to change. And for the first time in his life, he does not reach for control. He does not calculate the perfect words. He simply exhales and lets the truth come as it is, unpolished, unguarded. I was wrong, he says softly, his voice steady but stripped of the confidence that once defined him. And Lily's expression shifts just slightly, not in surprise, but in recognition, as if she has been waiting to hear those words not for closure, but for honesty. And he takes another step closer, careful, not to invade, but not to retreat either. I thought everything had to make sense, had to be controlled, defined, and you did not fit into that, so I made you something smaller, something easier to walk away from. And he pauses, his gaze steady on hers, not looking away this time, not hiding behind anything. But you were the only thing that was real, and the words settle between them, heavier than anything he has said before, because there is no defense in them, no expectation, just an offering, and Lily studies him quietly, her silence no longer distant but thoughtful, as if she is weighing not just his words, but the man standing in front of her now, compared to the one she left behind. And when she finally speaks, her voice is calm, but there is a depth to it that was not there before. You do not get to rewrite what happened. And Ethan nods immediately, accepting it without hesitation. I know, he answers, his voice low, certain. I am not asking you to forget it. And for a second something in her eyes softens, just enough to be seen, just enough to matter. And she looks down briefly, as if gathering her thoughts, before meeting his gaze again. Then what are you asking? And that question lingers, open, uncertain, and Ethan does not rush to answer, because for once he understands that this is not something to be solved quickly, not something to be negotiated or secured, and he says quietly, nothing, not right now. And there is a subtle shift in the air, something unexpected, something that does not follow the patterns either of them are used to. I just did not want to walk away again without telling you the truth, and the honesty in that moment carries no pressure, no demand, just presence. And Lily exhales slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly, not disappearing, but no longer rigid, and she glances toward the open cabin behind her, then back at him, as if standing at the edge of two different paths, and after a brief pause, she steps slightly to the side, not to let him pass this time, but to create space beside her, a small, quiet gesture that does not promise anything, but does not close the door either. And Ethan does not move immediately. He simply stands there for a second longer, understanding what that space means, understanding that this is not forgiveness, not resolution, but something far more fragile, an opening. And as the distant sounds of the terminal begin to return, reminding them both that time is still moving forward, Lily looks at him once more and says softly, my shift is not over yet. And there is something almost unspoken beneath those words, something that suggests this moment is not the end, just a pause, and Ethan nods, a faint, genuine expression crossing his face for the first time, not relief, not certainty, but something quieter, something real. And as he steps back, not away, but just enough to give her the space she has chosen, he realizes that for the first time, he is not trying to hold on to the outcome. He is willing to wait, and as she turns slightly, preparing to continue her work, the space between them no longer feels like distance, it feels like possibility.